I discovered something about you that changed everything. Not in a dramatic moment, not through a confession or sudden realization, but through a quiet pattern that kept repeating until it became impossible to ignore. It didn't announce itself. It revealed itself slowly, the way real truth usually does. I wasn't looking for it. That's the important part. When you look for meaning, you tend to manufacture it. When you're not looking, meaning shows up on its own terms. This showed up without asking for attention, and that's why it mattered. What I discovered wasn't about what he said. It was about what didn't change. I noticed it during ordinary moments, conversations that didn't lead anywhere, silences that didn't need to be filled, days where nothing special happened, and yet something stayed consistent beneath all that. Your presence didn't fluctuate with mood. Your tone didn't depend on circumstance. You didn't perform warmth. You embodied it quietly. The consistency caught my attention. Most people can maintain a version of themselves when things are exciting. Very few people remain themselves when there's no momentum carrying them forward. You did. Ahmet told me something I didn't expect to learn. I realized that being connected to you didn't create urgency in me. It created calm. Calm sharpened my thinking. It simplified decisions. It removed noise I didn't realize I've been tolerating for years. That kind of effect doesn't come from chemistry alone. It comes from alignment. I discovered that you didn't pull me away from who I am. You anchored me closer to it. When something disrupts your direction, you feel scattered. When something aligns with it, you feel focused. I felt focused. That's not accidental. It changed how I saw everything. I stopped wondering what something could become and started noticing what it already was. I stopped asking how things felt and started observing how they functioned. And what I saw was stability without stagnation, depth without heaviness, presence without pressure. That combination is rare. I discovered that I didn't feel the need to secure your attention. I didn't feel compelled to prove anything. I didn't adjust my pace to maintain interest. That absence of anxiety was the clearest signal of all. Security doesn't shout, it settles. You didn't make me want to move faster. You made me want to move accurately. Accuracy matters when something is weight. You don't rush precision. You respect it. That respect changed everything. I also noticed how you handled space. You didn't treat distance as a threat. You didn't feel silence with assumption. You allowed things to breathe without panicking about what they meant. That told me you weren't chasing reassurance. You were grounded in yourself. Grounded people don't cling, they choose. That's what I saw. I discovered that you didn't need to be seen constantly to remain present. Your presence wasn't performative. It wasn't dependent on response or validation. There was steady. That steadiness isn't something people fake easily. It comes from self-awareness. I've learned that the most important discoveries aren't about attraction. They're about compatibility of rhythm. How two people move through time when no one is directing them. Your rhythm didn't clash with mine. It complemented it. That changed the trajectory. I stopped thinking in terms of moments and started thinking in terms of systems. How things would hold up under pressure, how communication would behave during disagreement, how silence would be interpreted instead of weaponized. The system made sense. I discovered that you didn't create emotional noise to feel close. You didn't escalate to manufacture intensity. You didn't withdraw to feel powerful. You stayed consistent. That consistency made everything else feel unnecessary. Drama fades. Structure lasts. I also realized something else, something subtle but decisive. I didn't imagine a version of you. I responded to the reality of you. There was no gap between expectation and behavior. No adjustment period where I had to reinterpret who you were. Reality matched. That alignment is rare. I discovered that what changed everything wasn't a single quality. It was the absence of instability, no emotional spikes, no unpredictable shifts, no pressure to define things prematurely, just clarity unfolding at the right pace. That's when I knew something had changed. I didn't feel pulled forward by desire. I felt held in place by understanding. Understanding doesn't rush. It waits until it's complete before it moves. This discovery didn't make things louder. It made them quieter, and quiet is where I see best. I realized that whatever this is, it doesn't need defending. It doesn't need exaggeration. It doesn't need to be protected by urgency. It holds on its own. That's when everything shifted. Because once you recognize something that functions without force, you can't unsee it. You stop settling for anything that needs to be constantly managed. You stop mistaking intensity for connection. You start choosing differently. I discovered something about you that changed everything, not because it overwhelmed me, but because it made sense. And when something makes sense at this level, it deserves to be approached with care. Not rushed, not tested, not forced, just understood. If you're listening to this and recognizing the difference between something that excites you and something that studies you, then you understand what I'm saying. You felt that shift too. And if this discovery resonated with you, if you value clarity over chaos, take a moment to like this video. If you appreciate conversations built on long-term thinking, subscribe. And if something here felt personal, leave a comment, even a simple one. Progress matters. Understanding matters. Building matters. And sometimes one quiet discovery changes everything. I discovered something about you that changed everything. And this part is about what happened after the discovery when nothing outwardly changed, yet everything internally shifted. That's how I knew it was real. Real changes don't announce themselves. They reorganize you quietly. After noticing what I noticed, I didn't feel the need to act immediately. I didn't feel pressure to define anything or move faster. Instead, I felt a kind of stillness, like a system settling into its correct configuration. When something fits, it doesn't demand motion. It allows it. That stillness told me more than excitement ever could. I began paying attention to how my mind behaved when things slowed down. No overthinking, no second guessing, no internal negotiations. I wasn't replaying conversations or anticipating reactions. My thoughts were linear, focused, grounded. That absence of mental noise wasn't coincidence. It was alignment. I discovered that I trusted you without trying to. Trust didn't feel like a leap. It felt like a natural extension of consistency I had already observed. Trust built this way doesn't require reinforcement. It doesn't wobble when circumstances change. It holds. I also noticed how I stopped filling space with explanation. I didn't feel the need to justify my pace or interpret my silence. I didn't worry about how things appeared. When something is right, appearance loses importance. Function takes over. Function matters. I discovered that my energy didn't spike around you. It stabilized. And that's a subtle but critical difference. Spikes feel exciting, but they're unsustainable. Stabilization allows longevity. Longevity is one I value. This realization changed how I interpreted closeness. Closeness wasn't about proximity or frequency. It was about reliability, about knowing that presence didn't fluctuate with emotion, about sensing that nothing was being manipulated to produce a response. Manipulation kills trust. I also realized that I wasn't trying to predict you. I wasn't scanning for patterns to protect myself. I wasn't anticipating shifts. That told me I felt safe, not emotionally indulged, but structurally secure. Security doesn't entertain, it supports. I discovered that what changed everything wasn't some hidden trait or dramatic revelation. It was the absence of misalignment, the lack of emotional volatility, the consistency of values across different contexts. You were the same person everywhere. That consistency is rare. Most people, present versions as themselves, depending on environment or expectation. You didn't. That coherence changed how I evaluated everything else. I stopped thinking about potential outcomes and started observing present stability. That's a shift I don't make lightly. I've learned that present stability is the best predictor of future durability. Durability matters. I also noticed something else. I didn't feel the need to impress you. I didn't adjust my language or energy to maintain interest. I state myself without negotiation. When someone allows that without consequence, it's a sign of mutual respect. Respect simplifies everything. I discovered that you didn't interpret boundaries as rejection. You didn't test them. You didn't push against them to measure closeness. You accepted them as part of how someone functions. That acceptance matters. It told me you weren't seeking control or validation. You were grounded in yourself. Grounded people don't need to dominate space to feel seen. They exist fully. I also noticed that disagreement didn't feel threatening. I didn't anticipate escalation or withdrawal. I trusted that differences wouldn't become battlegrounds. That trust doesn't come from hope. It comes from evidence. Evidence had accumulated. I discovered that what changed everything wasn't intensity. It was coherence. The way your actions aligned with your tone. The way your presence didn't fluctuate based on outcome. Coherence builds trust faster than passion ever could. This realization made me more patient, not less. When something is clear, you don't rush it. You protect it. You let it unfold without interference. Interference breaks good systems. I found myself caring less about labels and more about longevity, less about reaction and more about direction. That shift didn't feel forced. It felt inevitable once the system revealed itself. I discovered that you didn't need to be managed. You didn't need reassurance to remain consistent. You didn't create emotional noise to feel close. That changed how I valued everything. Because once you experience connection without friction, friction starts to feel unnecessary everywhere else. This discovery didn't demand action. It demanded respect, respect for timing, respect for process, respect for something that didn't ask to be rushed or tested. If you're listening to this and recognizing that shift the moment where something stops exciting you and starts grounding you, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. And if this part resonated with you, if you value alignment over adrenaline, take a moment to like this video. If you appreciate conversations built on clarity and depth, subscribe. And if something here felt familiar, leave a comment, even a simple one. Some discoveries don't change the volume of your life, that changes direction. I discovered something about you that changed everything. And this part is about what revealed itself after time had room to work. When repetition replaced novelty and patterns became undeniable, that's when understanding stops being theoretical and starts becoming practical. Practical understanding is the kind you can build on without hesitation. Nothing dramatic happened. No turning point, no defining conversation. Just days unfolding the way days always do. And in that unfolding, something stayed intact. That's what I noticed. The consistency doesn't impress at first. It proves itself slowly. I watched how you moved when expectations weren't clear, when outcomes weren't guaranteed, when effort didn't promise immediate reward. You didn't adjust your integrity to match convenience. You didn't change tone to control perception. You remained yourself even when it would have been easier to perform. That's rare. I realized that your presence didn't require maintenance. I wasn't calibrating my responses to keep things smooth. I wasn't compensating for unpredictability. I wasn't translating silence into meaning. Things didn't need constant interpretation to remain stable. Stability without management changes everything. I also noticed how disagreement didn't fracture anything. It didn't escalate or harden into position. It didn't turn into a test of loyalty or control. It stayed contained, respectful, solvable. That told me we weren't just aligned when things were easy, we were compatible when they weren't. Compatibility shows up under pressure. I discovered that I didn't feel the need to prepare for conversations with you. No rehearsals, no contingency plans. I could speak directly and trust that clarity would land without distortion. That kind of communication isn't common. It's earned through behavior, not promises. Behavior had earned it. I began to notice how my time reorganized itself naturally. I wasn't dividing attention or negotiating priorities. Things found their place without friction. When something belongs, it doesn't demand rearrangement. It integrates. Integration is quite proof. I also realized that you didn't seek to be central to everything. You didn't require constant engagement to feel valued. You allowed space without suspicion. You respected independence without interpreting as distance. That kind of security is internal, not conditional. Internal security changes how everything works. I discovered that my energy stayed even, not elevated, not depleted, just steady. That steadiness allowed better decisions, better focus, better presence. I wasn't reacting to maintain balance. Balance was already there. Balance is underrated. I started paying attention to what didn't happen. No emotional spikes, no cycles of intensity followed by withdrawal. No need to clarify boundaries repeatedly. The absence of those things told me more than any highlight ever could. Absence can be evidence. I also noticed that expectations remained reasonable. There was no pressure to accelerate milestones. No subtle insistence on definition. No emotional leverage applied to speed things up. You trusted the process enough to let it run. Trust in process is rare. That trust allowed me to be more deliberate. When you're not being rushed, you think clearly. You build carefully. You make decisions that don't need revision later. I value that. I discovered that your curiosity was intrusive. You asked to understand, not to extract. You listen to learn, not to respond. That kind of attention doesn't drain it. Stabilizing attention is powerful. I also realized that care didn't arrive as performance. It arrived as consistency. Remembering small things, showing up the same way regardless of context, following through when nothing was at stake. Those details compound. Compounding creates durability. I discovered that nothing about this needed defending. I wasn't explaining it to myself. I wasn't justifying it to others. It didn't need validation to continue existing. It functioned independently of opinion. Function beats approval. As time passed, the discovery matured. It moved from observation to certainty. Not emotional certainty, structural certainty. The kind that doesn't fluctuate with mood or momentum. Structural certainty changes choices. I stopped comparing. I stopped evaluating alternatives. Not because options disappeared, but because relevance did. When something fits, alternatives become theoretical. Relevance is the real filter. I also noticed how respect remained intact even when we disagreed. There was no scorekeeping, no emotional accounting, no effort to win. Understanding remained a priority. Understanding protects alignment. I discovered that your sense of self didn't depend on outcomes. Success didn't inflate it. Uncertainty didn't diminish it. That stability made everything else predictable in the best way. Predictability in values is invaluable. As this understanding settled, my approach changed. I didn't lean in harder. I didn't pull back. I simply stayed consistent. Consistency isn't passive. It's the liver of restraint applied over time. Restraint builds trust. I discovered that this wasn't about discovering a trait. It was about recognizing a system that worked. Systems either scale or collapse. This one scaled under time without adding complexity. Scalability matters. I realized that what changed everything was an intensity or chemistry. It was coherence. Coherence between intention and action, between presence and principle, between words and behavior. Coherence is decisive. Once you see coherence, you can unsee it. You stop tolerating misalignment elsewhere. You start choosing environments, relationships, and commitments that operate the same way. This discovery recalibrated my standards. I didn't feel compelled to announce it. I didn't need to mark it with language. It lived quietly, influencing decisions without demanding recognition. That's how real shifts happen. If you're listening to this and recognizing the moment when something stopped being interesting and started being, right? You know what I mean? That moment doesn't come with adrenaline, it comes with relief. Relief is clarity. And if this part resonated with you, if you value coherence over intensity, take a moment to like this video. If you appreciate thoughtful conversations that prioritize structure and depth, subscribe. And if something here reflected your experience, leave a comment, even a simple one. Some discoveries don't change how you feel in a moment. They change how you choose for the rest of your life. I discovered something about you that changed everything. And this part is about what happened once that understanding stopped being new and started being trusted. Trust is different from belief. Belief can be emotional. Trust is behavioral. Trust is what remains when curiosity fades and reality takes over.